Bentley from Bad Religion. It is a pleasure to say we're welcoming you back to Australia in 2023. Well, it was only a couple of years, 2019. You managed to get here just before we all got locked down.
That's right. People, you know what? People have said, like, what do you remember right before COVID? I said, flying home from Australia. And then everything closed down. And I said, maybe it was our fault.
Yeah. And the very next thing you'll remember after COVID is flying back to Australia. So it'll be like a long weekend for you.
It's perfect. It's like a long hibernation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been an interesting couple of years because, you know, in the event of being locked down, we missed a couple of anniversaries. We had the 40th anniversary of when this band formed 2 years ago. And earlier this year, you had the 40th anniversary of the debut album. So how did you celebrate when you couldn't get out to celebrate?
We did the videos, the Decade series. We shot live concerts at the Roxy. A friend of ours, our lighting guy, and another friend of ours kind of run that Roxy club. And so we talked about, well, what if we just did as many songs as we could for 4 decades, for 40 years, one show per decade, and we did it twice. And we learned like 180 songs, and it was punishing, but it was great. So I'm glad that was pretty much our anniversary birthday celebration.
Well, I'm glad to see that happened. Now, there have been shows in recent months, but I think what's been missing has been the Age of Unreason album. Now, when you were here in 2019, you did tour that album, but it seems to be dropped from the current set list. Is that?
It doesn't mean to be. It just, I think what happened was we got caught up in losing that 40-year anniversary. We really kind of wanted to go back and have a retrospective of what we had as our catalog, and I guess that became more important than touring on Age of Unreason. The 40-year anniversary sort of usurped that. Like, we're touring on this album. It's like that kind of went away and was replaced with, we're sort of celebrating the 40th anniversary in a way that our set lists are sort of showing more of our catalog and less of new material. I don't know if that's going to continue. I don't think we're going to really start focusing on Age of Unreason. There's just too much material from other albums that we want to play as well. So it's kind of like this album that you feel bad that it came out at this exact inappropriate time for the world, but we're moving on. So. Yeah. You know, now it will come to that time where you've got 17 studio albums, and if you just play 2 songs off of each album, your 32 songs, you're probably just wearing Graffin's voice out at that point.
Yeah. Well, 1982, how could hell be any worse? To actually get on stage in 2022 and perform songs from that album, like when you were like that age, way back then when that album came out, you couldn't foresee possibly now that you would still be doing this at this age, would you?
No. I mean, we talked about for the songs on that album, we did have the discussion of writing material that would stand the test of time, that wouldn't sound or feel dated, maybe lyrically or musically. That was something that we did discuss. Like, if you could put something down on vinyl that like you could listen to in 30 years and it didn't sound like, oh, that was that time when they were talking about that person in particular or that moment in particular. So we did have that thought that these songs would last, but we just didn't think that we would be playing them, which is kind of awesome. So it's like, sure, we can still play them. And you know, one of the songs that we like to play, We're Only Gonna Die From Our Own Arrogance, is covered by so many other bands, right? Where it's mind-boggling to us how many bands have picked up on that song to play. Like, okay, cool, you guys keep playing it. We'll play it too. So it is fun.
Yeah. So you missed out on one album, the second album. So fill us in on the story as to how this band sort of had its first record, and then you departed for the second, and then came back.
We well, I mean, we're a band that made a demo, shopped it around, told labels, said, you're just terrible, we're not signing you at all. So that was the creation of Epitaph Records, which was us. We borrowed some money from Brett's dad to make the first album. And that album did well. We didn't realize how well for a bunch of kids from the Valley. We sold 10,000 units, which is unheard of for just kids not knowing what they're doing. We took all that money and started to make the next record, which was called Into the Unknown. Sorry. And first couple of songs we were in the studio making, and it was just kind of going in a very odd direction for me, because we weren't really progressing. We were sort of working on minutia of songs that we had just recorded the drum tracks for, and we're putting down like little frog sounds and like, oh, check out this, like I'm gonna hit this cricket bat thing. And I was like, why are we doing this? We're just wasting time. And I got frustrated and said, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I left. And they continued on making that record. And spent all of the money that we made from How Could Hell Be Any Worse making that record. And so the joke that we always have is like they printed 10,000 copies of Into the Unknown and got back 10,001.
Yeah. The time around 1982 when those first few records were coming out, like just to put it into perspective for our viewers here, I mean, in Los Angeles in the Sunset Strip in the late 80s, we were coming out of that whole Van Halen, Motley Crue. It was getting into the Guns N' Roses thing. By the time you were releasing your first records, I think the British Duran Durans, Spandau Ballets, Culture Clubs would have all been hitting into America at that time, and MTV would have started to take over. What were you rebelling against at that time?
For the, you know, in 1980, when we started the band, we were basically kids from the San Fernando Valley. And the San Fernando Valley is the sterility of the suburbs. That's really what we were rebelling against, is like, there's no culture. There's no, there just isn't anything worth investigating. It's like you're given the answers to things that you don't agree with. And so it wasn't about rebelling against a political ideology, because we were 15 years old. And so I can't even vote. I was just rebelling against the boredom of like, there just isn't anything here of value. And so we found skateboarding, and we found music, and we found we found an identity with a half a dozen other people that were like us, that we would listen to music from England, Australia, Germany, where we were trying to find all these new music that kind of spoke to people who just didn't know where they fit in anymore. So maybe it wasn't necessarily rebelling and just sort of breaking things, but it was more searching for an answer of like, this can't be it. This can't be the only thing that there is. It's just, having long hair, getting high, and listening to Rush is not enough.
Yeah, because I kind of consider the Valley as being Universal Studios down one end and getting a cheesecake at the Galleria at the other.
Right, and we were at the very far end, which is now Calabasas, where all the TMZ people now live. And that was kind of the end of the Valley. We were on the Ventura County line, so past us was just no man's land. And so we were pretty far removed. It was, it took 40 minutes to get into Hollywood. We weren't really part of anything out there. We were just the end of the millions of people.
Yeah. Also, in another life, you've also been a member of Me First and the Gimme Gimmes.
I have.
We've had a couple of Aussies in that band. Lindsay from Friends with Rom, Chris from the Living End. Have you worked with both of those guys?
I have. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was, for me, meeting those guys and playing with them always just reminds me of, and it was told to me when I joined the Gimmes, this is going to remind you why you love playing music. Because once you've done it for your whole life, sometimes you're just playing and you forget how much fun this is. And you bring in Chris and you bring in the doctor, and you're just like, oh, this is why I want to do this.
Yeah. So you import a couple of these amazing Australian musicians. Were you aware of them before you actually perform with them?
Yes, I was. Yeah, for sure. And it was funny because I was told, as I told them, we all tell each other, it's like, just put aside everything that you know that you do in your band, because we all grow up with a musical etiquette. You know what you're not supposed to do, and in the gimmies, you just do more of that. Do everything you're not supposed to do times 10, and it's just the greatest thing ever, because you stop caring about what's appropriate as a band, and you realize this is what makes it great, because it's so inappropriate. It's fantastic.
Yeah. With this band, Bad Religion, with a lead singer, Greg, do we call him Dr. Greg now? Because he's actually got an PhD.
He's a paleontologist. So he received his master's in geology at UCLA, and he got his PhD in zoology at Cornell. And so you put the rocks and the bones together, and you've got a guy that can break a rock and go, I know exactly what that animal is. But there is no degree in paleontology, so you do have to sort of piecemeal this thing together. What Bad Religion has is a scientist doctor in Greg, whose lyrical compositions tend to be pretty forthright and scientific, and a poet in Brett, who is a romantic, seeking these answers that he doesn't seem to have the ability to jump off the cliff to find. He wants those things, but doesn't find a way to have the faith to get there. And so those two combined make this kind of awesome yin and yang tug of war of the heartstrings and the doctor. That's what makes Bad Religion tick.
Just before we head off, I wanted to ask you too about Carlos de la Garza instead of Joe Barresi. Why the swap of producer after all this time?
I think that for the most part, the recording, and I'm going to use this word incorrectly, but the recording politics is left up to Brett, because he is Epitaph. He is our label. I mean, he's obviously our guitar player and a songwriter, but we all love Joe, and we worked a lot with Joe, and Brett had worked with Carlos on a couple of other Epitaph projects and had a really interesting time with him, and thought, I would like to work with him with my band, because I saw how he worked with these other bands, and I would like to see how that translated into Bad Religion. And differences are Joe is a real master of amplification and tones. He's got a way to get sounds out of guitars and drums that he is a master of. And Carlos is more of like, he just kind of goes, I don't like the way that sounds. Let's try something else. He's got ideas outside of just technical tones that I think Brett really clicked with. And that helped build this album in a way that Brett felt it was more freewheeling. It was a looser record. It didn't have to be perfect, because we were always searching for perfection, and Joe was really good at being like, you got to be on time, man. Which I appreciate. And this was kind of like, nah, which I also appreciate, because it's like, that harkens back to sort of the Suffer thing, where we were just on our own going, it sounded good to me. So I think, Carlos brought in a fresh set of ears for sure, and just came in from he had a different approach in how he thought we should be putting our tracks down, and I thought it was great.
Yeah. Well, we look forward to seeing you back in Australia, February 2023, with Social Distortion. Great double.
Yeah, big deal.
Yeah. How many times have you been to Australia? I've lost count, so I'm seeing if you still know.
8.
8?
8 times, I think.
I would have thought around 8 to 10. So yeah.
Yeah, I think 8. I'll have to go look at my passport.
Let's go and check the stabs. Good one. Well, great to talk to you, Jay. See you in 2023.
You too, Paul. Thanks, man.
Perfect.